All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to be talking about basically life after World War I for the U.S. people. Okay. Now, specifically, we're going to look at two things. One is the 19th Amendment, and the other is the Harlem Renaissance. Okay. So, here's your new standards, essential questions, and of course, the objectives. So the objective is we're going to analyze the significance of Stanton, Mott, and Anthony. These are the last names of three incredible women during the late um, 1800s and the early 1900s. Okay, then we're going to examine the events leading to the signing of the 19th Amendment, and we're going to create an argument on whether the embracement of African American culture will actually make life better for them. Okay, because remember, a lot of African Americans, especially in the South, they are looked down upon and things like that, basically seen as second class citizens. And you're going to see an embracement of part of their culture, particularly the arts. And we're going to see maybe did that kind of help break some barriers and let the rest of America embrace their culture as American culture. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the warm-up picture. All right, so here's your warm-up picture. The first question asks you basically analyze it and what's going on. Okay, I know there's not much going on, but there's still some stuff there. So um, look at the ladder. There's something written on there. There's something written on the box. Um, that should really help you um, answer that question. This is really going to help you even more when you tie in everything together, because the next question asks you to make a prediction of what the 19th Amendment means. Okay, so take a guess. Again, look at the ladder, look at what this person's standing on, and look at the person themselves. Um, what does that tell you? Add that all together, and you'll get your answer. Okay. So let's go ahead, pause the video if you're still responding, but if you're done, we're moving on, okay? But those of you guys who are still writing, again, pause the video, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we have to jump back like about 70 something years. Back in 1848, the woman you see up on top there, that's Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Okay, the other lady you see on the side, that's Lucretia Mott. These are the two women who basically decided they need to create a conference to talk about women's rights, and this was held at Seneca Falls, New York. Now, in retrospect, looking backwards, um, this is truly the birth of the women's suffrage. Okay. Now, the term suffrage does not mean to suffer. I know it sounds a lot like it, and a lot of people think that's what it is, but they're wrong. Okay. Suffrage means the right to vote. So, this is truly the moment when the discussion of women having the right to vote is really like set in place. It's no longer just an idea. This is when action is truly taken. Okay. Now, what they did at this conference was it's pretty interesting, pretty cool, but it's also kind of funny at the same time. They basically took the Declaration of Independence and said, you know what, we need to add some words in here, especially women, you know. So an example would be like to say, that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They changed it to we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal. So little things like that. Okay. Um, but basically, they discuss several things like what do women need, right? What rights do they deserve? And there were several things. Okay, the inability to control their wages, because again, women, even still to this day, sad to say, women are not paid exactly the same as men. It has improved throughout the years, but still, they're not equal. For every dollar a man makes, a woman makes like 90, like 1.93 cents, something like that. They're not exactly equal yet. Um, Same thing, the inability to control property. That was a big one too. Some places where a woman Her dad may have left her some land. If she got married, that land would go to the husband. If they divorced, the man would keep the property. Another one was this was interesting. It was a difficulty to gain custody in a divorce because the way the court saw it was the man is the one who's working. The man is the one providing. The man is the guy who can do all the stuff and provide for the children and things like that. The woman, she's basically her role is should be in the house, taking care of the children and the home. That's about it. So they really didn't look too well on women. But again, the number one thing that women all agreed on at this conference was we need the right to vote. And like I said, this is the time when they really took it seriously and go for it. All right. So in 1851, Stanton meets this very determined young lady named Susan B. Anthony. Now that's her when she's older, right? She didn't look like that when back in 1851. But the thing is, Stanton saw that this woman Anthony was very determined and very smart. So she was like, okay, you know what? Let's join together. She has this ambition, she has this drive. So they create the National Women's Suffrage Association. All right. And then they create this journal, well, magazine really, but it's called The Revolution, right? And they again changed their name to National American Women's Suffrage Association. But the thing is, as time was going on, the women's movement started to pick up a little bit, and more women were like, yeah, you know what, I deserve this, and it's my God-given right, and they were really seeing how badly they were treated and how much rights they were being denied and neglected. So what happened was the men in charge, the politicians and stuff like that, they started being like, okay, well, let's give them little rights here, little right there, little right there. That should calm them down, and that should make them be like, oh, you're the greatest, and things like that. Well, the women were kind of like, okay, cool, thanks, but we want more. We deserve more. They were appreciative of the rights that they were given, but they were like, yeah, we deserve more. Okay. Their goal, again, was the right to vote. So by the 1910s, their numbers in the National American Women's Suffrage Association grew big. Now remember, women do not have the right to vote, but they had the ability to put pressure on not only in the household, but in society as whole. And they were large enough that they could lobby congressmen and even the president fighting for their rights. Now, the uh, National American Women's Suffrage Association, they're doing things in the background, right? Making deals and trying to get stuff done in the background politically, democratically, with diplomacy. Then you got this other group, a newly formed group called the National Women Party. Now, while they're doing stuff like making backroom deals, shaking hands, doing stuff like that, these women are out in full force picketing. They're loud, they're marching, they're letting people know their frustrations. Okay. They picket the White House, they picket Congress, basically saying we deserve the right to vote. We deserve the right to vote. So you have one side who's being very quiet and you know following the politics, of trying to get things done, and then you got this other side who's shouting and hollering and things like that. Both of them combined, however, they do work. And the amendment is passed in Congress on June 4th, 1919. And it's not ratified by the states until August 18th, 1920, in which the 19th Amendment it becomes official and women have the right to vote. Now, here's the thing, too, what's interesting about the 19th Amendment. Um, Unlike previous amendments, which basically let African Americans vote, um, that amendment again let African males vote, not females. white women could still not vote. Black men could. Um, Same thing with Latin women, same thing. When this amendment passed, basically almost all women were able to vote. Okay, the only people who were not able to vote at this time were the Chinese. The Chinese Exclusion Act was still in force. They wouldn't be allowed to vote for another like 20 some years, you know? So, yeah, okay. But it's still the single largest extension of voter rights in US history. Okay, so here's my first question to you. Why do you think it took so long for women to have the right to vote? Why do you think it took, since, 1848 when they started really putting their foot down and fighting for women to vote? Why do you think it almost took 80 years? Why? You know, so again, think about how men perceived women back then. Think about, you know, um, things like that. You know, again, if you want to go back to the lecture and hear the kind of stuff they said and did, and how they kind of felt, especially with the giving a little bit of rights, especially that part. Um, go back to that, okay? Help you out. Okay, so pause the video if you're still writing, but we're moving on in three, two, one. All right, so the Harlem Renaissance, as you can probably figure it out, it started off in Harlem, New York. Okay, it was a social and but mainly artistic explosion that spread throughout the country and it echoed throughout the world. Okay, Um, now, thing is, some people say it may have started late as the 1910s, but it wasn't until the 1920s when it really just had that impact on American culture, and it really didn't stop until the 1930s. This was also known as the golden age of African American culture expression, but there was four stages of it. Okay, and all of it deals with the arts of some form. First is literature, books, then music, stage performances, which is like theater and movies and things like that. And then there's art. When we're talking about art, we're talking about physical art, paintings, sculptures, things like that. So here's the thing, a little quick history on Harlem. Originally, Harlem was meant to be kind of like an upper middle class white neighborhood back in the 1880s. But the thing is, too many people were building apartments there, complexes and stuff like that. So they started building them like crazy all over the Harlem area. It's one thing to build it, it's another thing to get it filled. Okay, and that's what happened. There wasn't that many middle class white families who were moving into Harlem, and the people who own the apartment complexes, they had to pay the mortgage, they had to pay for the property and stuff like that. So if there's only two families living in a 20 apartment complex thing, you're losing money, you know. So what happened was by the 1900s, um, a few middle class black families started to move in, and they're like, this is nice, this is a beautiful area, you know. Um, and they started saying, hey, you should really move to Harlem. Harlem's a really nice place. So more families started coming. Thing is, those white families that were living there, they didn't, a lot of them, not all of them, but also not none of them. There was quite a bit of them who felt that I don't want to live, next door to these black people, so they were kind of like, no, they try to force them out, trying to tell the landowners, like, hey, you need to get them out of here. But it's like, hey, you know what? If I get them out of here, who's going to take their place? No, 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 no. These rooms are being filled up. So yeah, no, they can stay. So some of these white families were like, well, we're going to leave then. It's like, go ahead. So they left. So then more African American families were like, hey, there's more room here. So they started coming in. Okay. Now, why did African Americans move to Harlem? Well, mainly it's because W.E.B. Du Bois, back in the 1910s, was telling African Americans, get out of the South. It's racist as heck down there. Things are really bad. You should really come up to the north. Okay, there's jobs up here, there's factories. Yeah, there's a little racism here and there, but it's nowhere near compared to what's being done in the South. That in the South, geez, it's horrible. Um, so yeah, so a lot of them did come. They went to New York, they went to Chicago, they went to Detroit, places like that. Okay. All right, so here's your next question. If Harlem had filled their buildings with white residents, do you think African Americans would have still gathered in one place like they did with Harlem, what they would eventually do? Or do you think they would have scattered across New York? Now, remember, last month and a half ago actually, we talked about cultural communities, Little Italy, Little Chinatown, things like that, right? But these guys took over a little area of town because they didn't speak the language, English language. They didn't know the traditions, the customs, the culture of America. So that's why they formed their own, took over little parts of town. African Americans, however, they spoke English. They were born here, they're citizens, they know the American culture, you know so that's what I mean. Do you think they would have huddled together like the Italians and the Chinese and people like that, or do you think that they would have just found, hey, there's a place to live over here, cool, I'm going to live over here away from Todd because there's a place to live over here? you know what do you think? What do you believe? Would they have gathered like all the other cultures, or do you think they would have just scattered about New York? Okay, so there's a writing prompt for you right there. Go ahead and use that to help you out. Okay, pause the video, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so now we're going to get into the Harlem Renaissance, more in specifically the different forms of art. First, we're going to look at literature, books. Thing is, the Harlem Renaissance style of writing brought a new creative style and a more energy to the books. There was more of the language used. There was more pop and flavor. Most books they tend to go linear and then kind of go up a little bit to the climax of starting to drop down. Some of these books just wavered off. They had their own style, had their own rhythm to it. It was really unique. One of the best known um, authors at that time was Langston Hughes. That's the guy you see with the right here, the bigger picture, smiling. One of his most famous books was called The Weary Blues in 1926. Okay, the next big author from this time was this young lady you see on the top corner. Her name is Zora Neale Hurston. She wrote a book called Jonah's Gourd Vine in 1934. Okay, then the guy you see on the bottom there, that's Claude McKay. He wrote this book called Harlem Shadows in 1922. All right. Other authors, uh, County McCullen and James Weldon Johnson. Okay. Now, those books I personally have not read, but when it comes to music, oh, I know these guys because music is my soul. Jazz was this sound that just shook, truly shook the world. You know, there was other music before, and this and that, but jazz was like, oh my gosh, this was amazing music. And this is what I mean, it did echo around the world. There's people around the world who were just like, oh, what's that noise? Oh, that is good, you know. And the thing is, it did not just attract black audience, it attracted white audience. And again, the people from around the world who appreciate music, they were just like blown away. The number one guy who just like revolutionized music was Louis Armstrong. Okay, you see him right there with the trumpet. Louis was just, I mean, when it comes to the trumpet, there's nobody better. I mean, nobody better. He had this gravelly voice. He was saying like this, just amazing. Just great, great musician. Next guy, Duke Ellington, phenomenal, phenomenal. He even had a band, orchestrated a band at one particular part, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Okay. The next one, Bessie Smith. Oh, this woman could holler. She was so good. You could feel her soul when she sang. It was just amazing. And another famous person was Fats Waller. Very good singer. Okay. Now, here's the thing I was telling you about Duke Ellington. There was a famous club in Harlem. It was a nightclub called the Cotton Club. It was opened in 1923. Now, the thing that made the Cotton Club unique was not only its location, it was how the building was. They had a huge, huge ballroom, and then they had two bandstands because they had live bands. You have to remember, this is a time when there was like no record player, just you put on some of that. No, no, they had the real bands. And when one would be playing and they're about to finish their set, then this other one would be ready to go. Um, and the thing is that made it unique too was they didn't close sometimes well past midnight. Nowadays, you're like, well, whoop whoop, the Taco Bell down the road is up 24 hours a day. Okay, yeah, but the thing is, back then, for a nightclub to be open that late, that was like, ooh, that's a place to be. That's a place to party. Because again, most places closed at like 10, 11, you know. Uh, and the thing is that made the Cotton Club kind of like, ugh, was that it only allowed white people. The art inside was from the Renaissance. So they had black artists, had paintings and stuff like that they had. The music that was playing, Duke Ellington, and was black, jazz music. But the thing is, the owners and the people who were going to it didn't want to associate themselves with African Americans. So great musicians like Duke Ellington, had to enter the back room with, the waiting staff and all the black workers at that place. They were not allowed in the front door, which is truly a tragedy, you know. So any black people try to go in, they were refused service. They weren't even allowed through the door. Now the thing is, as time went on, the club people were like, well, we'll survive elsewhere. We don't want to be associated with them because so they will move. It moved in 1935, but the thing is, the people who went said, it's not the same. This Cotton Club, this new one that's located at a different place, it just doesn't have that same umph, that same pop like it did before. And eventually it would close in 1940. Now, the thing is, some African Americans saw the Cotton Club as a racist place. How could you use our art, our music, and deny us access to it? That's ours. That's from our culture. So they saw it as a racist place that excluded them. But then you had this other group of African Americans who said, no, 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 you don't understand. Yeah, they're denying us this and that, which, you're going to find anyway. But the thing is, these white people are embracing our culture. They're looking at our art. They're buying it. They're enjoying it. They're listening to our music. They're embracing that music. That's our culture. Yeah, that's our culture. But they're enjoying it. They're embracing it. They're taking it in. So maybe that's the crack that's needed to break down the racism, to break them down, basically say, that these guys are people. You know, these people know look at their art, look at their music. It's just amazing. And then they'll see us in a different point of view. So you got two schools of thought going on about the Cotton Club. All right, so next we come to stage performances, actors and theater and movies. Um, thing is, black actors back in the day, they were, before the Harlem Renaissance, they appeared in stereotypical roles. They were played as servants, they were played as people who were dumb or the butt of the joke. They'd be like, "Oh, gee, I didn't know I can do that." Stuff like that really made them look dumb, made them look evil, things like that. But when the 1920s came, they showed that, hey, we can do drama, we can do comedy. We don't have to follow this stereotypical role of being the dumb person. We could actually have comedic timing and stuff like that. We could do musicals, we can dance, we can sing, things like that. So Paul Robeson, the guy you see up on top there without the hat, he basically said, that white people listening, to their music, looking at their art, watching them on theater and in movies and stuff like that, it is a way of cracking down that viewpoint that a lot of white people had of them. They're evil people, they're lazy, they're this or whatever. Whatever negative connotation thought they had on them. He's saying that this will be that crack to break that away, and then they'll see us for who we are, people just like them. Other famous actors, Josephine Baker, she's right there, considered one of the most beautifulest women to have ever lived. And she truly was. She was a beautiful woman. But her fame didn't really pick up until she went to Paris. When she went to Paris, oh man, she became world famous. Again, because of her talent, but also mainly because of her beauty. Again, she was a very beautiful woman, you can see. Anita Bush, another famous actress. Bill Bojangles Robinson, that's the guy you see up on top there with the top hat. Very skilled dancer. My God, he was good. Okay. Bill Pickett and Clarence Muse were other famous actors at that time. So now we come to your next question. If you were an African American back in the 20s and 30s, do you think you would see the Cotton Club as a racist place or as a place that is advocating African American culture in America? So again, how would you see it? Okay, again, go back to that part if you forgot, or if you just skipped through to this question, go back to the section on the music and actually listen to it, because I've had some students write down some stuff like, oh yeah, the Cotton Club was racist because they made him pick cotton. I never said that. I never put that. This is what was written in class. So that tells me that person was not listening. So hopefully you don't put something down like that, because that tells me that you did not watch this video. You were not listening to it or anything. You just probably skipped through and went to the straight to the questions and just, So be sure you actually answer the question and that it's actually relatively right. Okay. Make sure you actually listen to the lecture. Okay. So, how do you feel? Tell me about it if you were back then. All right. So, pause the video, but we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right. Now we come to physical art. So, again, paintings, sculptures, things like that. The problem is with this, African Americans were not allowed to be in art school. Okay. They were not allowed in art galleries, a place where artists display their art, where they could buy it and critique it and look at it, some of that. They weren't even allowed in. There were some museums that basically cut them off, said, you can only look at this section. You have to come through this side door and you can only come over here and look at this area. Because the white people, you know, were looking at all the other stuff over here, you know. So the thing is, a lot of them were denied to see art and to appreciate it. But that didn't stop them from being able to express themselves through art. One of the most famous people is this guy you see with the glasses right there. His name is Aaron Douglas. He is known as the father of Black American art. His paintings are absolutely beautiful. The use of colors and the style, as especially back then, was very, very unique and very good. Okay. Next person, Mary Lou Jones. She's right there. You see up on top. The guy you see down there with the paper, that is James Van Der Zee. Okay, very good artist as well. Okay, another famous one was Charles Alston. Now, when it comes to sculpting, there were two major women I wanted to talk about. Mainly this woman right here. See with the little deer looking thing? That's Augusta Savage. She is famous for making this bust, which is a statue of the head, shoulders, and that's it, basically. She made one of W.B. Du Bois, and it was like amazing. to look at. You can actually look it up on Google. It's like, wow. But she's famous for mainly doing clay portraits of just ordinary people. She would just go out there and look at people and be like, oh, their facial structure, this and that would be a good thing. Or this person looks really sad. Oh my God. And she would make their portrait in clay. And she also basically helped get African Americans into art school with the federal art projects in the 1930s. So she really advocated and pushed for African Americans to go to art school and be able to express themselves through art. So, true hero right there. The next one you see right there, that's Mata Vox Warwick Fuller. She was another very skilled sculptor. But again, I compared to Augusta Savage, I mean, I have to give it up to Augusta Savage. She's amazing, amazing, amazing woman. So now we come to the very, very end, and the first question I have for you is, which of the four subjects do you find interesting? Literature, which is books, stuff like that. That includes comic books. Okay, just letting you know. Music, performance art, which is again theater and movies and stuff like that, or art, physical art. Paintings and sculptures. And like I told the students in class, to me personally, when I see tagging on the train cars and stuff like that, I critique it. I look at it. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. That's really good. Oh, I like the way they blended that in, stuff like that. Okay, to me, that's art. When I see students tagging on paper and stuff like that, drawing their stuff, that's art. Um, and I challenge students all the time. Hey, let me see what you got. Let me see what you're doing. Let me see what you have. How's good? How's your skill? You know, and like I told them in class, anybody can just write whatever, chicken scratch on the side of a building. That's not art. That's vandalism. You know, but there is art in with the spray paints and stuff like that. Things like that. But it's a thin line between art and vandalism. You know, train cars, art on someone's property, someone's building, someone's business. Yeah, that's vandalism. They didn't ask for that. If you asked them, hey, can I put your store name on the side right here? I'm sure they would be down for that, especially if you're skilled. Then yeah, okay. So there's that one question for you. The other one you can do as well. This is specifically just for online. Okay. The question says, if you're able to get to YouTube, you know, listen to Louis Armstrong's Wonderful World. Go somewhere quiet, go to YouTube, type that in, listen to the sound, listen to the words. If you have to look up the words on Google, do that. But listen to it and let me know what your thoughts are on it. How do you feel? What was going through your mind and in your heart and your soul as you were listening to that song? Okay. Again, this bottom one is just for you guys here online. Okay. So once you do that, once you answer the final question, you are done for this class. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. Okay. So you guys take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later, all right?